The smell of disinfectant is always tied to death, but in the VIP ward on the top floor of the hospital, that smell was masked by the expensive scent of lilies until it was barely detectable. I stood at the foot of the bed, my 8-month pregnant belly protruding like an outsider who had stumbled into someone else's private party. On the hospital bed, my husband Philip had bandages wrapped around his head, his face pale as paper, but none of that mattered. What mattered was his right hand. The one that had sworn at our wedding to hold mine for a lifetime was now tightly interlocked with another woman's fingers. Jade sat by the bedside, a band-aid on her forehead, a few shallow scratches on her cheeks, which somehow made that face of hers, always oozing laziness and arrogance, look delicate and pitiful. She was wearing a hospital gown, yet still had a cashmere shawl draped over her shoulders. In the ash gray that Philip loved most, the doctor said it is traumatic dissociation. Philip finally spoke, his voice hoarse, carrying a drifting quality that wasn't directed at me. "Cassidy, I don't remember what happened these past few years. My memory stopped at the year we graduated college. Back then, Jade and I were still together. And not only did I not break down crying, I actually wanted to laugh. A concussion amnesia. If it were that poor student Cassidy from 6 years ago, the one with a full scholarship, working at the Yale Library, full of naive fantasies about the world, she might have been fooled by this pathetic acting. But now, I am Philip Vanderbilt's wife. I've been crawling and clawing my way through this so-called old money circle for 4 years, and I've long since learned how to see the rotten core beneath their elegant lies. He is lying not just because the doctor's earlier diagnosis was only a mild concussion, but because his thumb was unconsciously rubbing the back of Jade's hand. That is his habitual tell when he is nervous, guilty, or lying. He hasn't lost his memory. He just wants to escape. When the car accident happened, he and Jade were in that globally limited edition sports car. Meanwhile, his 8 months pregnant wife, was sitting alone at home in front of a cold dinner. Now that luxury car crashed into the guardrail and at the same time shattered the good husband mask he'd maintained for 4 years. He doesn't want to face the moral judgment for abandoning his wife and child, doesn't want to face the questioning from the family elders, so he chose the most cowardly yet most dignified way, hiding inside the shell of amnesia, pretending he is still that devoted young man who only loves his first love. "So you don't remember me?" I asked softly, my hand subconsciously stroking my swollen belly. Inside, our daughter was kicking restlessly, as if sensing her father's betrayal. Philip's gaze lingered on my belly for a second, a flash of panic and guilt in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a kind of resolve. He turned to look at Jade as if she were his lifeline. "I am sorry, Cassidy. In my mind right now, you are a stranger. This feeling is too confusing. If I force myself to play the role of your husband, it wouldn't be fair to you, and it would be torture for me." Jade lifted her head, those green eyes that always carried a provocative edge, now brimming with tears. "Cassidy, I am sorry. If you need money or some other kind of compensation. You know, Philip can't be without me now. This is fate's sign for us to be together after we escape death again." "Fate, no. This is an absurd drama you two directed and starred in yourselves." I felt my heart being squeezed hard by an ice-cold hand, the pain so intense I could barely breathe. Did I love Philip? Of course, I once thought that I, a slum girl from the Rust Belt with junky parents, had really caught the tale of a fairy tale. He was once my only fireplace in this cold big city, the home I desperately wanted to protect. But at this moment, watching him willingly erase our marriage along with our unborn child for another woman, that love was like expired milk, rapidly fermenting and going bad, giving off a nauseating sour stench. My rationality took over my body at this moment. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back firmly, not letting a single one fall. Right now, what I need is a heart harder than diamond. Since he wants to put on an act, I'll play along with him for one last show. I took a deep breath and put on a smile uglier than crying, full of brokenness. The doctor also warned me that forcibly stimulating the patient might cause permanent brain damage. "Philip, I love you, so I won't push you." Philip obviously didn't expect me to give in so easily. His tense shoulders visibly relaxed, and a hint of gratitude even surfaced in his eyes. "See, this is what men are like. When you accommodate his selfishness, he even thinks you are a saint." But I changed my tone, gentle yet firm. "Since you see me as a stranger, this marriage is already dead in all but name. You are the eldest son of the family. If the family trust and the board find out you are mentally unstable, it could be very troublesome." At the mention of the family and the trust, Jade's expression shifted. "I'll cooperate with you." I slowly walked to the bedside, looking down at this pair of star-crossed lovers. I'll file for divorce citing incompatibility. Even though I am pregnant now, I'll help you keep the secret of your amnesia and give you and Jade a dignified freedom. In exchange, we need to talk about an agreement." Philip looked like a huge weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He nodded eagerly. "Of course, Cassidy, I won't treat you unfairly. You can have whatever you want. I don't want much." I lowered my eyelids, hiding the coldness in the depths of my eyes. "Just something that is worthy of my 4 years of devotion and a guarantee for this child's future." After saying that, I didn't give them another glance and turned to walk out of the hospital room. The moment I closed the door, I heard Jade's cheers and Philip's doting whispers from inside. That sound cut into my back like a knife. I leaned against the cold wall and let out a long breath. "Goodbye, my love. From this moment on, you are no longer my husband. You are just my prey." After leaving the hospital, I didn't go home. Instead, I went straight to a divorce law firm. When I slapped a thick stack of documents onto the mahogany desk, Philip's personal lawyer, an old man with slicked-back shiny hair and eyes like a shark's, showed a contemptuous smile. "Mrs. Vanderbilt," he deliberately drew out his tone, "or should I call you Miss Cassidy, since Mr. Philip's situation is special? I think we should follow the prenuptial agreement that was signed back then. You signed it yourself. If you divorce, you can only get a token severance, probably enough to buy a small apartment in the suburbs. As for the child, the Vanderbilt family will set up a trust, but custody, I am afraid we'll have to discuss that separately." I sat across from him, holding a cup of warm water in my hands. My fingertips were still a bit cold, but my mind was clearer than ever. The prenuptial agreement, that was the slave contract I foolishly signed at 23, without a lawyer present, just to prove I wasn't marrying Philip for his money. Back then, I naively believed love could transcend class, that as long as I was obedient and sensible enough, I could fit into that glittering world. Looking back now, it was nothing more than a firewall set up by the wealthy to prevent gold diggers, like us, from getting even a single breadcrumb. If it were a normal divorce, that would indeed be the case. I set down the water cup and took out a voice recorder from my bag, a backup extracted from the dashcam of the sports car Philip had crashed. Philip thought that once the car was destroyed, the evidence would be gone too. But he forgot that as his wife who had obtained the relevant licenses to help manage his assets, I had the right to access the cloud backup. "What are you trying to do?" The old lawyer's smile froze on his face, his eyes becoming wary. I pressed play. Amid the noisy background, the roar of the sports car's engine was clearly audible. Then came Philip's voice, no longer the weak one from the hospital bed, but one filled with excitement and desire. "Damn it, Jade. I only feel alive when I am with you. Cassidy is like a boring nun, forcing me to drink vegetable juice and read financial reports every day. I am sick of that home, sick of that pregnant woman." Then came the sound of clothes rustling, Jade's seductive moans, and screams and the crash before the car lost control. Dead silence in the office. This recording not only proved that Philip was lying, he had no amnesia at all. He was lucidly humiliating his wife just a second before the crash. It also proved that this was a serious accident caused by the driver engaging in inappropriate sexual acts while driving. If this recording got out, not only would Philip's carefully crafted, devoted amnesiac persona collapse, the Vanderbilt family's stock price would plummet. And more importantly, there was a specific infidelity and fault clause in the prenuptial agreement. If one party caused the marriage to break down due to adultery or serious misconduct, the prenuptial agreement would be voided, and the at-fault party would have to pay punitive damages. The old lawyer's face instantly turned ashen, and he stared intently at the recording pen, as if it were a bomb about to explode. "I don't want this half of the family fortune. It is too troublesome and too slow." I turned off the voice recorder and put it back in my bag, leaning slightly forward, my gaze sharp as a knife. "I want cash, right now. I want that penthouse on the Upper East Side. I want all the child support for my daughter from birth to adulthood, paid in one lump sum, and I want all the shares of that maternal and infant care company under Philip's name. I know it is a money-losing mess that the family is preparing to divest. I want it, although that company was losing money. It had an extremely well-established supply chain and R&D laboratory, exactly the foundation for my future comeback." The lawyer wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. He knew that if I didn't sign and sent this recording to any tabloid, Philip would be finished. What the Vanderbilt family valued most was their reputation. They would never allow such a scandal to make the papers. "You need to sign a confidentiality agreement," the lawyer said through gritted teeth. "This recording must be destroyed." "Of course," I smiled, stroking my belly. "I only want money and freedom. As for Philip and his true love, I wish them together forever." The negotiation went even more smoothly than I had imagined. In the face of such a massive scandal threat, the so-called elite arrogance crumbled instantly. 3 hours later, I walked out of the building with the signed agreement in hand. The autumn wind in New York carried a hint of chill, tousling my long hair. I looked at the zeros on the check in my hand, yet there wasn't a trace of joy in my heart, only a deep emptiness. The man I loved for 4 years, the father of the child in my belly, ultimately became nothing but this string of cold numbers. I flagged down a taxi. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. I looked back at that skyscraper piercing the clouds, as if gazing at the tombstone of the first half of my life. "To the bank," I said softly. Then to the best real estate agency. Sitting in the back seat, I finally allowed myself to shed a single tear. Just one. I wiped the corner of my eye, pulled out my phone, blocked all of Philip's contacts, then dialed a headhunter. "Hi, I'm Cassidy. I've got a company that needs restructuring and I need the best team. Yes, we're going big." Philip thought I was a bitter woman who got dumped. Jade thought I was a loser slinking away in defeat. But they were wrong. This wasn't just an ending. This was my rebirth. I would use this money in this cruel world to forge an indestructible golden fortress for me and my daughter. As for love, let it rot in that wrecked sports car, along with that cheating pair of scumbags. The night I gave birth, a rainstorm was pounding New York. No husband by my side, no flowers or blessings, only the cold sound of medical equipment and the thunderous rain outside the window. When the contractions crashed over me like waves, I bit down hard on my lips until I tasted blood. In that moment, what flashed through my mind wasn't fear, but an unprecedented clarity. I must survive. For this little life that is desperately trying to come into this world, I must be stronger than anyone. With a loud cry, my daughter Harper was born. The nurse placed that little pink bundle on my chest, her warm skin pressed against my heartbeat, and in that moment all the pain, grievances, and loneliness miraculously melted away. I looked into her dark, moist eyes, the purest lake in the world. I swore I would never let her repeat my mistakes. She wouldn't have to struggle for survival in the mud, like I did, nor would she have to suck up to anyone for so-called security like I did. She would be free, proud. She is a Vanderbilt, but more importantly, she is my daughter, Cassidy's daughter. The first week after leaving the hospital, I barely got any sleep. On one side was a crying, hungry baby. On the other was the pile of mess I had just inherited. That mother and baby company wasn't just losing money, it was a sieve. The management was bloated, the product lines were outdated, and the financial reports were an absolute disaster. But I had no time to complain. I put the cradle next to my desk, nursing Harper with one hand while circling every hole in that tattered report with a red pen. I fired that CEO who only knew how to drink coffee and read newspapers, slashed all the flashy marketing budgets, and poured every last bit of remaining funds into new product R&D. I was going to create a truly safe, effective baby skincare cream without any allergenic ingredients. This was my most genuine pain point as a mother who had just given birth and was utterly disgusted by the chemical-laden products flooding the market. "Cassidy, you've lost your mind." My partner, and also my only best friend from Yale, Sarah, looked at my bloodshot eyes and said, "You just gave birth. You should be doing your postpartum recovery, not here arguing with suppliers." "I haven't lost my mind, Sarah." I gently placed the sleeping Harper into the cradle, turned my head, my gaze sharper than a scalpel. If I don't fight tooth and nail, that $200 million in compensation will eventually run dry. What I want isn't just money. I want a voice, the confidence to make that family who looked down on me regret it. Just when I was swamped beyond belief, the tabloids didn't let me off either. Although Philip and I had signed a confidentiality agreement and publicly claimed it was an amicable split, the paparazzi who could sniff out anything still captured photos of Jade moving into Philip's mansion. On the newspaper headlines, Philip was still sitting in his wheelchair, eyes melancholic, Jade pushing him, the two gazing deeply at each other. The headline read, "True love conquers all. Vanderbilt heir rekindles flame with first love. Abandoning his wife." Although the article didn't call me out by name, between the lines it implied that I was a boring, greedy woman with no sense of romance, completely unworthy of the noble Vanderbilt family, and Jade was the muse goddess who saved the prince from his misery. I looked at that photo, my heart as calm as still water. I even found it a bit funny. "Philip, do you really think Jade is your salvation? That woman can't even take care of herself. So how could she possibly take care of a patient who is irritable from a car accident and needs long-term rehabilitation?" Sure enough, within 2 months, rumors of their argument started circulating in our circle. Word was that Jade got tired of the boring routine of accompanying Philip to the hospital for rehab every day and started hanging around nightclubs and parties again. And since Philip couldn't satisfy her due to his physical condition, the two often threw things around the mansion, even alarming the neighbors into calling the police. Meanwhile, I was debuting my new product, Harper's Pure, at the largest mother and baby expo in America. With the minimalist formula, the authentic entrepreneurial story, and the independent, clear-headed single hot mom persona I'd built on social media, my product became an instant hit. Countless young moms left comments on my ins, saying my story inspired them, saying my product cured their baby's eczema. In just half a year, the company's sales increased tenfold. Those Wall Street elites who once mocked me for taking over a failing asset started to reassess this woman who dominated the boardroom while holding her baby. I am no longer that Mrs. Phillip who depended on a wealthy family. I am Cassidy Vanderbilt, or more accurately, I am Cassidy Miller. Although I kept my ex-husband's surname for Harper's sake in the business world, my name itself represents a newly rising empire. Harper's 100th day in this circle. There is a special term for it, sip and see, according to old money family tradition. This is an important ceremony to formally introduce a new family member to the social circle, although Philip and I are already divorced. Harper is, after all, the only bloodline of this generation in the Vanderbilt family, at least for now. Philip's mother, Mrs. Eileen, the woman who could maintain perfect makeup even at a funeral, took the initiative to call. Cassidy, her voice was still that haughty and cold, as if nothing unpleasant had ever happened between us. Next weekend at the Manor, I am throwing a party for Harper. You know how it is. It is tradition. I wanted to refuse that hypocritical world of fame and fortune. I didn't want to stay there a single minute longer. But Mrs. Eileen paused, and there was actually a hint of barely noticeable pleading in her tone. Your father, old Mr. Vanderbilt, hasn't been feeling well lately. He really wants to see his granddaughter. I thought of that old man who always kept a stern face, yet would secretly slip candy to pregnant me when no one was around. In this cold family, he was the only elder who had ever shown me a bit of warmth. Okay, I agreed. This is also an opportunity. I want to show everyone that the Cassidy now is no longer that meek little wife. I am going back with my pride and my trump card. On the day of the party, the sunshine in the Hamptons was so bright it was almost blinding. On the lawn of the Vanderbilt estate, white tents had been set up, and flowers covered the entire garden. The champagne tower sparkled in the sunlight. Waiters in tailcoats moved about, and the guests were elegantly dressed, chatting and laughing. I was wearing a sharply tailored white jumpsuit, my hair simply pinned up, holding Harper in my arms, who was wearing a pink lace dress. The moment I walked into the garden, the originally noisy crowd fell silent for a few seconds. Countless gazes were cast upon me, some curious, some mocking, and some surprised. I held my head high, smiling and meeting every gaze. My skin was firm and radiant from long-term use of my own products, my eyes confident and composed from my career success. I was no longer that meek shadow following behind Philip. I was the light. Mrs. Eileen walked over, her gaze lingering on Harper for a long time, genuine affection showing in her eyes for the first time. She looks a lot like Philip when he was little, she said softly, reaching out to touch Harper's little hand. Harper wasn't shy with strangers. She grabbed Mrs. Eileen's finger and giggled. Just at this harmonious and joyful moment, a piercing screech of brakes shattered the tranquility of the garden. A red Ferrari stopped at the edge of the lawn. The door opened, and Jade stepped out. She was wearing an extremely extravagant gold deep V gown, the hem dragging on the grass, carrying a huge gift box in her hand. Her makeup was heavy and gaudy, yet it couldn't hide the fatigue at the corners of her eyes and that hint of neurotic excitement. Philip hadn't come with her. Oh my, such a lively party. How come nobody told me? Jade wobbled over in her high heels, her voice shrill and grating. I am here to give the little bastard, oh no, the little darling, a gift too. The whole crowd was in an uproar. Mrs. Eileen's face instantly turned ashen. In this circle, decorum was above all else, and showing up uninvited while speaking rudely was simply the biggest taboo. Miss Jade, Mrs. Eileen said coldly, this is a private party, please leave. Don't be so heartless, Auntie Eileen. Jade ignored her and walked straight up to me, her eyes filled with jealousy and venom. Cassidy, you think having a baby means you can ride on your child's coattails. Philip loves me. This child is nothing but an accident, a mistake. As she spoke, she slammed the huge gift box down hard on the table. The box fell open, revealing a dead black cat that had been made into a specimen, with a tag reading "curse" hanging around its neck. Ah, The guests around let out terrified screams. I instinctively covered Harper's eyes and held her tightly in my arms. In that moment, the rage inside me completely exploded. "Get this crazy woman out of here." Mrs. Eileen was shaking with rage, pointing at the security guards and shouting. Two tall bodyguards immediately rushed up and seized Jade. "Let go of me. I am the future Mrs. Vanderbilt. How dare you touch me?" Jade struggled desperately, her hair disheveled, looking completely deranged. "Philip divorced you because of me. He'd do anything for me." "Take her away," Mrs. Eileen barked, then turned to the butler. "Throw that disgusting thing in the trash now." Jade was dragged toward the door, one of her high heels falling off, looking utterly pathetic. Just before being dragged out the front door, she suddenly burst into a shrill laugh. "Go ahead and throw it. Throw it all you want, just like you threw away that useless Philip." She turned her head, staring dead at Mrs. Eileen and old Mr. Vanderbilt, who had just walked out of the house, and screamed, "You treat this bastard like a treasure, because you don't know yet, do you? Your precious son, Philip, to show his loyalty to me, to make sure no illegitimate child would ever share my money. He had a vasectomy long ago, the irreversible kind, and me, I can never have children in this lifetime. The Vanderbilt line ends here. This illegitimate daughter you look down on is your only granddaughter for the rest of your lives." Surprised? Shocked? Ha 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 ha. These words exploded like an atomic bomb over the Hamptons. Time seemed to freeze. Old Mr. Vanderbilt clutched his chest, his face instantly turning purple-red, and fell backward stiffly. "George!" Mrs. Eileen screamed and rushed over. The scene descended into chaos, screams and cries for help filling the air. I held Harper in my arms, standing in the center of the storm, watching this absurd farce unfold before me. Philip cut off his own bloodline. Jade is infertile. I lowered my head and looked at Harper in my arms, oblivious to all of this, chewing on her fingers with a clueless expression. So it turns out, true revenge never requires dirtying your own hands. Fate had already marked the price in secret, and they could no longer afford to pay. The ambulance siren pierced the tranquility of the Hamptons, and old Mr. Vanderbilt was rushed to the hospital. The party ended on a sour note, with guests hurrying away carrying their fright and gossip that was about to blow up the entire Upper East Side. I didn't leave. As Harper's mother, and the only outsider present who could take charge, I stayed to calm the panicked servants and instructed the butler to keep the news under wraps, preventing the media from getting wind of the situation immediately. Mrs. Eileen sat on the living room sofa. The queen, who was usually so high and mighty now, seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. She clutched a handkerchief tightly in her hand, her empty gaze fixed on the dancing flames in the fireplace. "Is it true?" She suddenly spoke, her voice terribly hoarse. "What Jade said, is it true?" I handed the sleeping Harper to the nanny, walked over and sat down beside her, poured myself a glass of water and said calmly, "I don't know, but Philip is an adult. If it is for that woman, he is capable of doing it." Mrs. Eileen suddenly turned her head, staring at me intently, as if trying to find a gloating expression on my face. But I had none. I just calmly looked back at her, like watching a distant relative who had met with misfortune. "You knew all along that Jade couldn't have children?" she asked. Guessed. I admitted frankly, those years she spent in Europe weren't exactly proper. There were some rumors in the circle. As for Philip, that was his choice. Mrs. Eileen closed her eyes as two streams of tears rolled down her cheeks. She was an extremely shrewd woman and instantly understood what this meant. The Vanderbilt family's vast commercial empire, centuries of accumulated wealth and prestige without a qualified heir. It would all crumble like a sandcastle in this generation, and now the only bloodline was in the nursery upstairs. Just then, the door was roughly shoved open. Philip rushed in, still wearing his rehabilitation workout clothes, drenched in sweat, clearly having sped all the way from downtown. "Mom, how is Dad?" he shouted, then froze when he saw me sitting on the sofa. "Cassidy, why are you here?" Mrs. Eileen slowly rose to her feet and walked up to her son. Slap! A resounding slap sent Philip's head snapping to the side, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. Mom Philip held his face, staring in disbelief at the mother who had spoiled him rotten since childhood. "You went through with that surgery." Mrs. Eileen's voice was trembling, each word seemingly squeezed out through gritted teeth. "For that crazy woman, you cut off the Vanderbilt family's future." Philip's gaze flickered for a moment, a telltale sign of guilt. "That is my body, I have the right to decide," he retorted with his neck stiffened, trying to mask his fear with anger. "Jade doesn't want kids, and I think kids are a hassle too. We just want our own little world for two. What is wrong with that? What era is this anyway? Do we still need to breed like studs for the family lineage? You bastard. Madame Eileen raised her hand in anger to hit him again, but let it drop weakly. Do you think the family trust is for selfish pricks like you to squander? Do you think those old foxes on the board will tolerate an heir with no offspring sitting in that position? Philip obviously hadn't thought that far ahead, or rather, blinded by love, he simply didn't care. There is still the Branch families anyway, he muttered. Branch families, Madame Eileen sneered, pointing upstairs. Do you have any idea that crazy woman Jade almost ruined Harper's 100-day banquet just now? Do you have any idea that she is your only child now? Philip froze, his gaze instinctively turning toward the stairway. Jade, she just loves me too much, she is insecure. He was still trying to defend that woman. Besides, doesn't Harper have Cassidy taking care of her? I looked at this man still living in his man-child fantasy, feeling a deep sense of weariness. Philip, I stood up and straightened my clothes. I only stayed here because of Harper. Now that you are back, I'll be leaving. As for whether you get a vasectomy or go child-free, that is your freedom, and it has nothing to do with me. But I am warning you, if that crazy girlfriend of yours dares to come one step closer to Harper, I'll file a restraining order, or even sue her for intentional harm. After saying that, I walked toward the stairs to get the child. As I passed by Philip, he suddenly reached out and grabbed my wrist. Cassidy. His eyes were complicated, filled with guilt and a hint of barely noticeable longing. You've taken such good care of Harper. That skincare brand is doing pretty well too. I saw the news. I pulled my hand back and looked at him coldly. Thanks for the compliment. It is all thanks to my generous ex-husband's alimony. Philip's expression froze. As I carried Harper out of the manor gates, I looked back. That mansion I once looked up to, that I had nervously tried so hard to fit into, now looked so dilapidated and desolate in the fading glow of the sunset. And in my arms, Harper was sleeping soundly. I knew the balance of power had completely shifted. From now on, the Vanderbilt family would no longer be my masters, but territory for me to conquer. Old Mr. Vanderbilt pulled through, but the doctor said he couldn't handle any more stimulation and needed complete rest. This became the last straw that broke the camel's back. The family board of directors urgently convened a closed-door meeting. Although I wasn't present, my lawyer, who has countless informants on Wall Street, told me immediately. The directors were extremely disappointed with Philip's performance, and some even proposed activating a backup plan, adopting a child from a Branch family, or directly grooming the third generation, and this third generation could only be Harper. Over the next few months, my life underwent earth-shattering changes. Mrs. Eileen started appearing frequently at my company and apartment. She was no longer that lofty mother-in-law, but a grandmother so kind she was almost fawning. She bought Harper countless expensive toys and clothes, and even used her connections to help my brand break into Europe's high-end department store channels. Cassidy, bring Harper back to the estate for dinner this weekend. Your father really misses her. Cassidy, I'd like to invite you to co-chair the family's charity gala this quarter. Cassidy, take a look at this trust fund document. I've added you to Harper's guardian list with full veto power. Faced with these sugar-coated bullets, I accepted them all. Why not? This was what Harper deserved all along, but I stayed clear-headed at all times. I still lived in my own apartment, still went to work at the company every single day without fail. I wouldn't let Harper become a canary in a cage, and I wouldn't let myself become an accessory to the elite again. Meanwhile, Philip and Jade's lives had sunk into a quagmire. The video of Jade going crazy at the party that day got uploaded online. Although PR quickly took it down, everyone in the circle had already seen it. She became a real laughingstock, and all her former party friends avoided her like the plague. As for Philip, after being cut off from most of his financial sources, he had to start dealing with the daily grind of life. Jade was used to spending without limits, and Philip's measly dividends weren't even enough for her to buy a few handbags. Arguments, heavy drinking, and even physical fights became their daily routine. One late night, I got a call from the police station. Mrs. Vanderbilt? Oh, sorry, Miss Miller. Your ex-husband has been detained on suspicion of domestic violence and drunk and disorderly conduct. He refused to contact his parents and would only call you. I could have just hung up, but I still went. I wanted to see just how low that once arrogant man had dragged himself down to. At the station, I saw Philip sitting on a bench in the holding cell, scratch marks on his face, clothes torn, reeking of stale booze. Seeing me, he suddenly looked up, a glimmer of light flashing in his eyes. Cassidy, I knew you'd come, he rushed to the bars, like grasping at a lifeline. Bail me out. That crazy woman, Jade, is a total devil. She actually hit me with an ashtray. I stood outside the iron bars looking at this pathetic man, feeling not a ripple of emotion in my heart. "I've already paid the bail," I said calmly. "The lawyer will come later to handle the paperwork." Philip breathed a sigh of relief, that familiar, ingratiating smile appearing on his face. "Cassidy, I knew you still had me in your heart. Can we talk? I want to come home. I want to see Harper. I know I was wrong. Jade isn't the one I was looking for at all. Only you are the most suitable person to be my wife." He reached out his hand, trying to touch my hand through the bars. I took a step back and avoided it. "Philip, you've got one thing wrong." I looked into his eyes and said word by word, "I am here, not because I still have you in my heart. It is because you are Harper's biological father, and I don't want her father to be a convict with a criminal record. That would affect her applications to elite schools in the future." Philip's smile froze on his face. "As for coming home," I let out a light laugh. "That home was already destroyed by your own hands. The home now belongs to me and Harper. There is no place for you in it. But I am Harper's dad." He got anxious. "I did it for her. I did it for the family. You did it for yourself." I cut him off. "Every decision you made, whether it was cheating, faking amnesia, or getting a vasectomy, was all for your own pathetic, cowardly self. Don't use the child as an excuse." After saying that, I turned and left. Philip's desperate cries came from behind me, but I didn't look back. Walking out of the police station, the night breeze was slightly cool. I looked up at New York's brilliant starry sky, my heart feeling lighter than ever before. That man who once made me look up to him, made me feel inferior, made me anxious about gains and losses, has finally been completely stripped from my life. What is left is just a stranger who happens to share my blood. My future is shining brightly ahead. 3 years later, Paris. As the founder of Harper's Pure, I have been invited to Paris Fashion Week, where I will be launching our mother and child collection in collaboration with a top designer. The backstage was busy yet orderly. I was wearing a silk champagne-colored blouse paired with high-waisted wide leg pants, doing final checks on the model's makeup. Now I spoke fluent French, and every gesture had long shed the naivety and awkwardness of the past, replaced by a confidence that commanded the room. "Miss Miller, someone outside is asking for you," my assistant whispered to me. "He says he is your old friend." I frowned slightly and walked out of the backstage. By the outdoor cafe outside the venue, I saw Philip. I hadn't seen him in 2 years, and he had aged a lot. Although he was still wearing an expensive tailored suit, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes and the gray hair at his temples made him look 10 years older than his actual age. His eyes were no longer clear, but carried a deep weariness and loneliness. Seeing me come out, he hurriedly stood up, looking somewhat flustered. "Cassidy, long time no see. Is there something you need?" I glanced at my watch. "I have 15 minutes before I go on stage to give my speech." I was just passing by. "Saw your name on the poster and wanted to come see you." His gaze roamed greedily over my body. "You've changed. You've become more beautiful, more radiant." "Thank you." I nodded politely, but distantly. "If there is nothing else, Jade and I broke up," he suddenly interrupted me. His tone urgent. "She ran off with my last bit of savings with some Italian male model. I am completely free now." I raised an eyebrow. "Congratulations, then." "Cassidy, I am serious." He stepped closer, trying to close the distance between us. "I've thought a lot these past 2 years. I really regret it. I shouldn't have given up my family for so-called passion. You are the best wife and the best mother. The family, mom and dad, also hope we can remarry. Harper needs a complete family, doesn't she?" He was pulling out the same old lines again. Complete family, the child, the family. I looked at him and suddenly felt so sad. This man, even now, still didn't understand that what he lost wasn't just a wife, but a heart that once truly loved him. "Philip," I sighed, "Harper has a very complete family. She has a mom who loves her, grandparents who love her, and lots of friends who love her. As for a father, that is not a role you can play just by having a marriage certificate." "I can change, I can learn," he argued urgently. "I am reading parenting books every day now, and I've quit drinking too. It is too late." I interrupted him, my voice soft yet firm. "You know what? When you pretended to have amnesia in the hospital that day, when you went to get a vasectomy for Jade, the Cassidy who loved you was already dead. The me now doesn't need to depend on anyone, nor do I need to fill anyone's emptiness. I love myself, love my daughter, love my career. In my world, there is no room left for a betrayer." Philip's face instantly turned deathly pale. He opened his mouth as if wanting to say something, but found himself at a loss for words. Just then, A black minivan pulled up by the roadside, the door opened, and Harper burst out like a little cannonball. Mommy, Harper, just over 3 years old, was wearing matching mother-daughter outfits with me, exquisitely adorable like a porcelain doll. She threw herself into my arms, giggling away. Philip's eyes lit up when he saw Harper, and he instinctively tried to step forward. "Harper, I am Daddy." Harper heard the voice and turned to glance at him. It was the kind of look you give a stranger, with a hint of curiosity and wariness. Then she shrank back into my arms, hugging my neck. "Mommy, who is this mister?" Those words, like a heavy hammer, struck hard on Philip's heart. He froze in place, his outstretched hands suspended in midair, trembling, yet no longer able to touch the little life he had pushed away with his own hands. "This is an uncle I know." I patted Harper's head, neither embarrassing Philip nor giving him any hope. "All right, baby, we need to go in. It is our turn to go on." I picked up Harper, turned around, and walked toward the brilliantly lit runway. Behind me, Philip stood alone in the autumn wind, like a withered fallen leaf. The Paris Fashion Week show was a huge success. The photo of Harper and me walking hand in hand on the runway for the curtain call made the covers of major fashion magazines. The headline was, "Cassidy Miller, the stunning transformation from wealthy family's abandoned wife to business queen." After returning to New York, I received a call from Mrs. Eileen. "That bastard. I mean Philip, he is back in New York." Her tone carried a helpless frustration of disappointment in someone who refuses to improve. "He moved back to the manor and locks himself in his room all day." "Cassidy, I know I shouldn't bring this up again. But, if you are willing, Aunt Eileen," I interrupted her. Even though our relationship had warmed now, I still held my ground. "There is no possibility between Philip and me anymore. But I promise you, Harper will always be a Vanderbilt granddaughter. That won't change." Mrs. Eileen was silent for a long time, then finally sighed. "All right, you are right. That boy doesn't deserve the you of today." Hanging up the phone, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, overlooking this city that never sleeps. The lights of Central Park looked like a flowing galaxy reflected in my wineglass. Harper was already fast asleep, the nanny watching over her in the next room. Soft jazz flowed through the apartment. I thought of that girl who had just received her Yale acceptance letter, carrying a worn-out suitcase, standing lost on the streets of New York. Back then, she thought marrying a prince would be the ending of a fairy tale. I thought of 4 years ago, that wife who was mocked by Jade at a high society party for wearing the wrong dress, hiding in the bathroom crying secretly. Back then, she thought as long as she endured, she could earn acceptance. And now I have my own business empire, a sense of security that no one can take away from me. A few days ago, I ran into Jade on the street. She was coming out of a pawn shop holding a few bills, her face sallow, her eyes clouded. When she saw me, she instinctively dodged, trying to hide her face in her collar. I didn't stop, nor did I go up to mock her, because there was no need anymore. She lives in her own hell, and Philip lives in his regret. This is the greatest punishment for them, and I still have a longer road ahead. My phone buzzed, a new email notification. It was an email from Forbes, inviting me to this year's Most Influential Women in America Summit. I smiled as I set down my wineglass and replied to the email. In this arena of fame and fortune, filled with desire and scheming, I was once a dog trying to please its master, then a caged canary. But in the end, I became a lion. I don't need a prince's kiss to wake me up, because I am the queen myself. The neon lights flickered outside the window, reflecting the gleam in my eyes. That gleam belongs to no one else, only to me.